They told us the future of money would be open, decentralized, free from control. But what if the blockchain revolution was never about freedom at all? What if it was the quiet construction of a new world? Financial grid built not by rebels but by the same institutions that have ruled money for centuries. Behind every price chart and crypto headline, something far bigger is unfolding. The banks, the asset managers, even the regulators are not fighting crypto anymore. They are building on it, and the foundation they have chosen is not Bitcoin. It is Ethereum. The network born from code and ideals has transformed into the laboratory for a digital empire. A programmable economy where every dollar, bond, and share can live inside a line of code. To the public, it looks like innovation. To the elites, it is the perfect upgrade. Programmable compliance, instant settlement, infinite control. In 2020, global markets nearly collapsed. By 2025, tokenization became the lifeline. BlackRock, JP Morgan, and the world's largest banks began moving trillions of dollars of real-world assets onto Ethereum rails. They called it efficiency. But buried in the fine print were smart contracts that could track, freeze, and reroute value with a single command. And as the world celebrated financial modernization, the real infrastructure of power was quietly shifting from paper to protocol. Still, there is a twist. Because while Ethereum builds the digital face of this new financial system, another ledger waits beneath it. Faster, leaner, engineered for true settlement across borders. A ledger the banks do not advertise, but the insiders quietly acknowledge. XRP, two networks, two destinies, one visible, one hidden. Ethereum may control the code of compliance, but XRP, the neutral bridge, was built for something far greater. To move the world's value without borders, without middlemen, without permission. The question is, which one will rule the future? Because the same institutions that praise Ethereum's innovation also fear XRP's independence. And as the new system forms, the divide between freedom and control may depend on which ledger the world truly adopts. This is the story of Ethereum, the hidden blueprint of the new financial system. Part 1. The foundation building the programmable economy. Every revolution begins with an idea that sounds impossible. In 2015, a young developer named Vitalik Buterin launched Ethereum with a simple vision. A blockchain that could do more than move money. A blockchain that could think, that could execute agreements without banks or lawyers. It was called smart contract technology. Code that would replace trust. What began as a dream of freedom quickly became the most powerful experiment in financial automation the world had ever seen. Developers built decentralized apps, tokens, and marketplaces. Billions in value moved across this new digital frontier. Ethereum became the language of a new economy. The media called it the Internet of Money. But the ones watching closely saw something else forming. Behind the creativity and open source ideals, global institutions were taking notes. They saw a network that never slept. Transactions settled in seconds. Contracts enforced by logic, not law. For the first time, they could imagine a financial system that operated 24 hours a day, without clerks, couriers, or clearinghouses. To them, Ethereum was not a threat, it was a prototype. By 2017, major corporations were already building private versions of Ethereum inside boardrooms and data centers. The Enterprise Ethereum Alliance quietly connected banks, tech giants, and government agencies. They called it innovation. But it was more like a merger between Wall Street and Silicon Valley. The infrastructure of freedom was slowly being reshaped into a regulated digital fortress. Then came DeFi. Decentralized finance exploded in 2020 with yields and trading platforms built entirely on Ethereum. Billions of dollars flowed into protocols with no middlemen. It looked like the future of open finance. But every transaction, every token, every contract was still traceable, still programmable, still under the eye of whoever controlled the network infrastructure. The very tool meant to free the people had become the perfect testbed for a programmable monetary system. While the crypto world celebrated Ethereum's success, governments and institutions were studying the blueprint. They saw how to tokenize debt, stocks, and real estate. They learned how to lock liquidity, monitor flows, and build compliance directly into code. And they realized that a world running on smart contracts could be managed with precision never before possible. Ethereum had created the foundation of programmable money. But in doing so, it had also revealed how the entire global economy could be rebuilt from the ground up. Every asset, every transaction, every citizen connected to a digital ledger. As developers chased innovation, the elites were preparing integration. Ethereum was no longer just a blockchain. It was the foundation of a new programmable economy, and the race to control it had already begun. Part 2. The financial infiltration. As Ethereum's ecosystem grew, so did the attention from the world's most powerful institutions. What started as a playground for developers was turning into a digital Wall Street. The same banks that once dismissed crypto as a threat were now quietly building within it. They were not joining the revolution, they were rewriting it. By 2022, whispers of integration became open announcements. JP Morgan launched its Onyx network. Goldman Sachs filed patents for blockchain-based settlement. BlackRock invested directly into Ethereum-linked infrastructure. Regulators who once warned against crypto were suddenly using the same language they once condemned. Tokenization, digital settlement, on-chain liquidity. Ethereum was no longer an outsider. It was being invited into the boardrooms of global finance, not as a disruptor, but as a foundation. A programmable layer where the world's assets could be recreated in code and controlled with precision. Bonds, real estate, treasuries, even carbon credits began to appear as tokens on Ethereum rails. What once lived in vaults and databases now lived on-chain. Every token carried data, every contract carried rules, and every transaction left a permanent trace. This was efficiency at the surface, but surveillance beneath. Banks could now move assets instantly, verify ownership instantly, and freeze or modify value instantly. The very traits that made blockchain revolutionary also made it the perfect instrument of control. Institutions moved quickly. Projects like BlackRock's Bridal Fund, tokenized treasuries by Ondo Finance, and government pilots all chose Ethereum as their testing ground. The goal was clear: bring the old system onto digital rails without ever losing control of it. Programmable finance was no longer an experiment. It was becoming the new operating system for global money. But there was another motive behind the rush. While the world was distracted by decentralized dreams, the real game was consolidation. The ability to run global settlement on one programmable network meant power like never before. The network that controlled liquidity would control the future. Ethereum, with its flexibility and smart contract dominance, was the perfect gateway. Institutions could build on it without appearing centralized. They could promote innovation while quietly embedding regulation into the code itself. The new system would not need paper laws. It would enforce rules automatically. As the financial elite built deeper into Ethereum's infrastructure, they were not just testing technology. They were creating digital pipelines for a new monetary era, a system where code replaces policy and where compliance is programmed, not requested. The infiltration was complete. Ethereum had become the foundation of the new financial experiment. And while the world celebrated the rise of DeFi and digital assets, few realized that the very rails carrying this revolution were now being welded into the architecture of the old world order. Yet deep beneath this structure, another network watched silently. One built for speed, neutrality, and real-time global settlement. One that had not been captured, but had been waiting. XRP. Part 3. The hidden hand, ETH Gate, and control. For years, the crypto world believed Ethereum's rise was organic, a triumph of innovation. But beneath the surface, another story was unfolding. A story of influence, protection, and selective regulation that would forever change the balance of power in digital finance. In 2018, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission drew a line that would shape the future of crypto. Bitcoin was declared a commodity. Ethereum was declared not a security. That single statement opened the floodgates for institutional investment. Billions flowed into Ethereum overnight. Exchanges listed it freely. Developers built without fear. At first, it looked like a victory for decentralization, but the deeper truth was far darker. The man who made that declaration, William Hinman, had direct financial ties to Simpson Thacher, a law firm that was part of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, the same network of companies that stood to gain from Ethereum's success. Documents and speeches later revealed a trail of meetings between regulators and Ethereum-linked executives. Decisions were made behind closed doors. Other projects that threatened the system's control, like Ripple's XRP, were targeted instead. Ripple was sued. Ethereum was given immunity. The timing was no coincidence. This became known as ETH Gate, the moment the playing field tilted, the moment the new financial system quietly chose its prototype. Ethereum became the chosen chain for compliance, smart contract development, and institutional trust. Not because it was the best technology, but because it was controllable. The leadership was visible, the governance was malleable, and the network could be influenced by regulation when needed. As the lawsuit against Ripple dragged on, Ethereum's ecosystem exploded. Layer 2s, stablecoins, and tokenized treasuries surged. Governments began building pilots on Ethereum rails. To the public, it looked like progress. To insiders, it was consolidation. The regulators had chosen their partner, and the rest of the market would have to play by their rules. But behind the headlines, something strange persisted. Despite years of attack, despite suppression, XRP remained faster, cheaper, designed from the beginning not for speculation, but for settlement. It was the antithesis of the controlled network being built in plain sight. While Ethereum captured compliance, XRP represented resistance, a bridge asset engineered for interoperability, capable of connecting every financial system on Earth. A threat to the very structure Ethereum was helping to solidify. ETH Gate was not just about favoritism, it was about direction. It ensured that the first layer of the new financial system would belong to those who already controlled the old one. A digital version of the same hierarchy, rebuilt in code. But history has a pattern. Every empire built on control eventually faces a reckoning. And while Ethereum's web of alliances grew tighter, the silent power of XRP continued to spread across corridors the public could not yet see. The question was no longer whether blockchain would reshape finance. It was who would control it when the dust settled. Part 4. The Tokenization Takeover by 2025. The word tokenization was no longer a buzzword. It had become the mission statement of global finance. Every major institution from Wall Street to the IMF spoke the same language. The future of money would not be printed, it would be programmed. And at the center of it all stood Ethereum. Trillions of dollars in bonds, stocks, treasuries, and funds began migrating into digital form. Real estate portfolios were minted as tokens. Commodities were divided into fractional ownership. Even artwork and carbon credits were uploaded into blockchain code. The world was moving its wealth from paper to protocol, and Ethereum had positioned itself as the digital vault to contain it. BlackRock launched tokenized liquidity funds. JP Morgan processed settlement through its blockchain arm using Ethereum standards. Governments built regulatory sandboxes directly on Ethereum sidechains. Every move was sold as progress toward efficiency, speed, and transparency. But hidden in every contract was a new kind of control. When assets live on programmable rails, ownership becomes conditional. Smart contracts can enforce compliance automatically. Tokens can be frozen, rerouted, or erased with a few lines of code. In the old system, laws were debated. In the new one, they are executed instantly. Every rule is embedded in the transaction itself. The dream of decentralization was mutating into a digital architecture of surveillance. Banks no longer needed middlemen to enforce control. The code itself had become the enforcer. Ethereum was evolving into the settlement layer of the tokenized economy. But the freedom that once defined crypto was quietly dissolving into regulation by design. The global rollout accelerated. Stablecoins and CBDCs were being tested on Ethereum-based frameworks. The promise was interoperability, but the result was dependency. Every transaction, every transfer, every piece of value would need to touch a network approved by the system. A programmable economy connected through code, monitored in real time and enforced without question. While the world celebrated this leap in efficiency, few noticed that the bridge between blockchains, the link between digital economies, was being ignored. XRP, the ledger designed for instant global settlement, remained in the background. The technology existed, the rails were ready, but the narrative belonged to Ethereum. Yet deep within institutions, the truth was becoming impossible to hide. Tokenization might live on Ethereum, but global settlement could not. The world's value could not move freely without a neutral bridge. That bridge was XRP. Ethereum was the architecture. XRP was the movement. One built the walls. The other connected the doors. And as the tokenized world expanded, cracks began to appear in the illusion of control. Systems that looked unified were isolated. Networks that promised transparency were fragmented. The world had built its digital fortress, but it needed a way to move value between its towers. The tokenization takeover had succeeded, but it had also revealed the flaw in its own design. The world was ready for digital assets, but not yet ready for digital freedom. And in that space between control and liberation, XRP waited. Part 5. The Global Reset or the Next Trap. The world now stood on the edge of a digital reset. Fiat currencies were faltering, debt was spiraling, and confidence in the old system was slipping away. The solution being offered was not reform, but replacement. A fully tokenized economy built on programmable assets, digital identities, and blockchain settlement. To the public, it was progress. To those who understood the code, it was something far more dangerous. The institutions that once warned against crypto were now the architects of its evolution. The World Economic Forum called it the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The IMF called it financial inclusion. The BIS called it innovation. But behind the language of change was the same goal that had guided money for a century: control. Ethereum was the foundation. The rails for tokenized assets. The network of programmable rules. The digital skin of a system that no longer needed paper, cash, or even consent. Every token represented value, but also vulnerability. Every transaction revealed identity. Every rule was hard-coded. There would be no gray areas, no off-ramps, no escape from the algorithm. This was the true potential of the new financial order. A system that could reward obedience and punish dissent without firing a shot. A world where money itself became conditional. Spend it where they allow. Hold it only if you comply. Lose it if you step outside the parameters of the program. The ultimate silent weapon. But not every network was built with those intentions. Beneath the control grid, another path was emerging. XRP, the neutral bridge, had continued to evolve quietly. Designed for speed, transparency, and neutrality, it was the opposite of the programmable cage forming around Ethereum. It did not rely on permission or pre-approval. It settled value instantly across borders without bias. While Ethereum became the layer of compliance, XRP remained the layer of freedom. One served the architects of control. The other served the architecture of exchange. The two were destined to collide. And as central banks tested their digital currencies and governments prepared for the new reset, a question began to echo across financial corridors. Could XRP become the neutral bridge that keeps the system balanced? Or would it be suppressed before it could connect the world? The outcome would decide the shape of the future. If Ethereum remains dominant, the new financial system will be programmable, traceable, and governed by invisible algorithms. If XRP rises, the system could become truly interoperable, a global web of value moving freely beyond the reach of any single authority. The reset is coming. Whether it becomes liberation or control depends on which ledger wins. The new code of money. The financial world is being rewritten in real time. The paper trails that once guided wealth are fading, replaced by lines of code that never sleep. Nations are digitizing currencies, corporations are tokenizing assets, and the global elite are building a system where every transaction is traceable, every asset programmable, and every rule enforceable without question. Ethereum became the prototype. The visible face of a new era where compliance and innovation walk hand in hand. It promised decentralization, but delivered control disguised as progress. It taught the world how to move money through code, how to automate trust, how to rebuild the financial system from the ground up. But in the shadows of that transformation, another network has continued its quiet mission. The XRP ledger, built not for speculation but for settlement, not to control but to connect. While others programmed limitations, XRP was designed for freedom. It bridges currencies, assets, and nations with no bias, no permission, no borders. It carries the same message the internet once carried when it was free. Information wants to move. The true battle of this century is not about which coin is worth more. It is about who writes the code that governs value itself. Will the future of money belong to a programmable system controlled by institutions, or to an open network that connects the world's liquidity without prejudice? The answer will define more than markets. It will define freedom. Because when money becomes code, whoever controls the ledger controls the people. And when the world finally chooses its rails, it will not just be choosing technology, it will be choosing trust, transparency, and the future of independence itself. Ethereum may have written the first chapter of the new financial system, but XRP may yet write the last. This is not just about crypto. This is the transformation of money, power, and control. The question that remains is simple. When the new system goes live, whose ledger will you stand on?